Hey everyone, a while back I made a video about my 5 favorite accessories for the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema cameras. Today we're going to do something similar, but instead of looking at the physical features of the Pocket 6K and the accessories you can put on it, I'm going to talk about my 5 favorite internal features of the Pocket Cinema cameras. I own the Pocket 6K, so that's what I'll be using to show these features, but just to keep in mind that most, if not all of these features apply in the Pocket 4K as well as the Pocket 6K Pro as well. But before we get started, I noticed the other day that my channel and the subscriber count had a K next to it. When I started this channel, I definitely didn't think I'd ever have 1,000 subscribers on it, so thank you. And just out of curiosity, what was the first video you saw from my channel? Let me know down in the comments what the first video you saw from my channel was, because I'm curious to know how long some of you guys have been following along. So head down there and do that. But now, let's get started. Number 1, Blackmagic RAW. Okay, so this one really does go without saying, but one of my favorite features of the Pocket Cinema camera, and one of the main reasons a lot of people buy it, is because of its ability to shoot Blackmagic RAW. Now, I didn't really take advantage of Blackmagic RAW for a long time after I bought the camera, because it was only available in 6K. And my computer really struggles with 6K RAW once you start to color grade it and edit it. But recently Blackmagic rolled out a firmware update that lets you use Blackmagic RAW in 4K. So 4K in Blackmagic RAW has been my go-to setting for just about everything I shoot recently. I edit in Adobe Premiere and I use the Autochroma plugin for B-RAW, and it's been amazing. It's really worked super well. Being able to change your white balance and ISO to a certain extent in post non-destructively is a game changer. Also with B-RAW, you have this option called highlight recovery. And seriously, I don't know how it does it, and it really makes me start to question Blackmagic design and the name of the brand, but you can literally check that box and it will recover highlights to a certain extent, which is just insane. Number 2 is the menu system. I think most people will agree that the menu system on the Pocket Cinema cameras, when compared to other cinema cameras, is extremely simple and easy to use. Now, when I got the Pocket 6K, I was used to using Canon's menu system. So coming from that DSLR mirrorless world, it was really easy and it didn't take very long to get used to. Paired with the 5-inch touchscreen, everything is very straightforward and easy to get to, and it's laid out in a practical order with the things that you use most on the first tabs and the things you don't use as often are on the tabs further away. So having a nice menu system is something I can really appreciate, and it makes using this camera a lot easier. All right, number 3 is shutter angle. Okay, so if you're like me, when you got your Pocket 6K or your Pocket 4K or whatever, you might have been like, what in the world is shutter angle? Okay, I'm gonna try to explain this really quick, but keep in mind, my knowledge is very limited on this, so this is just how I visualize it. If you want like an actual technical definition, go look it up and get an expert's answer, because I definitely don't know what I'm talking about when I come to this. Right, but here's basically what shutter angle does. Imagine that every time your camera takes a frame, your shutter is a circle, and it completes one rotation for every frame your camera takes. And you can kind of open and close part of the shutter to adjust how much light you want to let in. So if your shutter angle is at 180 degrees, it's open for half of the time that it takes to take each frame, which means that if you keep your shutter at 180 degrees, it'll always stay at double your frame rate, because no matter how many frames you're taking each second, it knows to keep the shutter open for half of the time it takes to take each frame. Just go look up an expert's answer. I don't know. That's just how I visualize it in my mind. So the reason I love this is because you can set it to 180 degrees, and it's the same as keeping your shutter speed at twice your frame rate. And it doesn't change depending on like what frame rate you're shooting in. So if I switch frame rates, it'll adjust the shutter speed accordingly. That's why I like it so much. It's one less setting that I have to worry about. Once again though, go look up an expert's answer after you get done watching this video, because I just did a really not good job of explaining that. So, on the note of frames and shutters, my next favorite thing about the Pocket 6K is that you can choose any specific frame rate that you want to shoot at, up to its maximum frame rate, obviously. Once again, coming from that DSLR mirrorless world, most DSLRs have those set presets for frame rate. So you have like 24 frames per second, 30 frames per second, 60 frames per second. On the Pocket 6K, you can choose any specific frame rate. If you want to shoot at like 37 frames per second, you can do that, or 52. I don't know. I don't care. You can do whatever you want, you know? So if you show up to a wedding and it gets to the ceremony and you want to film at 48 frames per second, you can do that. Now, this might be obvious to a lot of you who already know this, but for those of you who don't, you might be wondering, like, why would you shoot at 48 frames per second? I'm glad you asked. So during something like a wedding ceremony, all right, I'm using a real life example of how I use it. When I'm filming a wedding ceremony, I want to have the option to slow that footage down into slow motion, but I know that some of that footage I'm gonna want played back in real time too.
You may kiss your bride.
Now, if you use 60 frames per second and then you play it back in regular speed on a 24 frames per second timeline, it will drop frames at random intervals along the timeline because 60 doesn't divide into 24. But if you shoot in 48 frames per second and then you put it on a 24 frames per second timeline and you don't slow it down, it just drops every other frame so it doesn't look jittery. Now, obviously, since you shot in 48 frames per second and your shutter speed was a little bit higher, it's gonna look a little extra sharp, but at least it's not gonna look jittery, and it's totally usable in my opinion. Recently at a wedding, it got to the reception and I didn't like how slow 48 frames per second was, but I didn't like how fast real time was. So I just shot, I wanna say I shot in 33 frames per second and then interpreted that down. I think maybe it was 36, I can't remember. But basically, it was just like slowing it down a little bit. And it looked way better than real time because real time was just too much movement going on. But slow motion was too slow. So I got some footage in like 36 frames per second and slowed it down to 24, and it was just a slight slow motion going on. So it's really nice having that option on the Pocket Cinema cameras where you can choose whatever you want based on the energy of the video, based on how slow you want things to be, you can choose. So really love that feature. And number 5 is media options. Now this one, I might be breaking my own rules a little bit because this one is also a physical feature, not just a software feature, but I really love how the Pocket Cinema cameras can record to multiple different media types. A lot of cinema cameras on the market have very limited media that they can record to, and sometimes the media they record to can be very expensive. To give you an extreme example, if you own certain RED cinema cameras, the memory cards, like the RED mini mags, those things cost over $2,000 a piece. And then that's just to record. Then to offload, you need this special card reader that costs you an extra couple $100 just to transfer the media off onto your computer. But on the Pocket 6K, you can record to SD cards, you can record to CFast cards, you can record to external SSDs. When you first get the Pocket Cinema camera, chances are if you shoot on other cameras, you've already got some compatible media laying around. When I'm shooting weddings, I like to use my Silicon Power CFast cards, and this is mainly to keep my rig compact. But for videos like this one right here, being able to just record straight to a Samsung T5 and plug it into my computer and not even offload, edit the entire project on there. I mean, that is super helpful, and it speeds up the entire workflow of creating a video. And even if I do need to transfer files, like the transfer speeds on an SSD are ridiculously fast. And this is one of the main reasons that I don't use my EOS R to shoot these talking head style tutorials and interviews, is because when I'm shooting on my EOS R, the files are more compressed for one, so they're harder to edit. And also, I'm shooting to an SD card, and the time it takes to transfer those 4K files off of the SD card onto my computer is ridiculous. Like, it takes so long just to transfer the files. So at the end of the day, the Pocket 6K on the outside may not be the most convenient camera. I mean, you pretty much have to rig it out for every shooting scenario, let's face it. But on the inside, it boasts some really incredible features that make the entire workflow, the entire process of creating a video, smooth, seamless, and efficient, with some incredible results at the end. As always, thank you for watching this video, and if you want to see how I built my cinema camera, I've done a couple videos on that, and I'll put those probably right over here. And if you want to see a list of parts that I use on my rig, you can head down to the description and go to my kit page. I've got all the parts listed there. Again, thank you for helping me reach 1,000 subscribers. I really, really, really appreciate it. And if you weren't one of the first 1,000 subscribers, there's still room for you to be one of the first 2,000 subscribers by hitting that red button down below. And while you're down there, give it a like so that more people can see this video. Thanks again, and I will see you in the next video.